Welcome. I am Je'anna Clements, and I would like to talk today about what I call the invisible parenting style. And this is an aha that's been looking at me in the face for quite some time, but I finally figured out how I can best explain it. So let's see if I get that right. You can let me know. So if you go to Psychology Today and you go to the blog of one Dr. David J. Brederholt, you'll find a really nice summary about the four accepted parenting styles. And the accepted idea, as his heading shows us, that there is a right and wrong way to parent. He offers this diagram that he's put together based on the original work by Baumrind, later developed by Maccabee and Martin, to explain what those four parenting styles are. And most of us by now have heard about them. The authoritative, which is supposed to be the good one, the authoritarian, which doesn't give great results, the permissive, which doesn't give great results, and the uninvolved, which used to be called originally the neglectful, which doesn't give great results. Results, of course, being something that people could discuss and contend, but if we look at how these things are mapped onto the matrix, that's where it gets interesting. Because on the one hand, we have this one axis, which is all about how warm and responsive a parent is. So you can see on the authoritarian end that responsiveness is quite low, whereas on the authoritative end, it's quite high. There's quite a lot of warmth going on. And then the other axis is called demandingness by Baumrind, which has been variably, they've been looking for different words, control, strictness, etc. And there again, you can see that for both authoritative and authoritarian, there's quite a lot of demandingness. And for permissive and uninvolved, there's quite low demandingness. And that's the matrix onto which these four get mapped. So a number of people over time have seen a problem here, and they've tried to articulate it. Alfie Kohn is one of the first that I sort of saw when I was going, hey, I'm sure there's a problem here. Does anyone else see it? And I was like, oh, Alfie also thinks so. Then there must be one. But what exactly is the problem? And that's something that's taken me a while to be able to pin down and see. Let's now see if I manage to flesh it out. So those of you who've worked with me for a while will be very familiar with this framework. And this is my way of describing two different ways of relating around power relationships. I developed this framework when I was trying to figure out why nonviolent communication wasn't working for quite a few of the people that I was trying to support and help with learning how to parent differently and also to facilitate self-directed education. I was getting a lot of people saying, oh no, we did NVC and it was a disaster. And so I started trying to look at what was the DNA behind things like parent effectiveness training and how to talk so kids will listen and NVC and Ross Green CPS. And I started trying to distill that. And what I came to is that there's these two different kind of cultures actually in the world. The one that you see on the right there, the horizontal approach, you actually do see in history where it's more about cooperation and bonding and equality. Whereas then you have the invaders coming in with their war culture, which is all about obedience and a hierarchical chain of command. The person at the top commands the person at the bottom who can't talk back without permission, etc. Whereas, in the horizontal side, we're listening to each other because we all matter. So then we have concepts like multi-partiality coming in. Now, the important thing to notice here is what happens when we try to map this to what we just saw on the previous page, right? When we try to map them together with those two axes, those two sliders, maybe we first of all think, oh, well, demandingness, control, and strictness obviously belongs on this side. And then we might say, well, responsiveness and warmth belongs on this side. So then we could assume that that means that authoritative is the perfect balance between the vertical culture and the horizontal culture, between those two ways of relating. But I can tell you that's where my alarm bells go off, because that's not what it is at all. And I think that the problem is that we all grew up with vertical culture because it took over the globe. Colonialism brought it to all of us, to the point that many of us think that that's now our traditional culture, whereas actually, if we dig a little further back, we'll find, yeah, no, it's really, most of the world got traumatized into accepting vertical as normal, and that's now how we see it's like the air we breathe. We expect hierarchy and obedience, and we expect to feel a little distant from people and not be understood and, yeah, not always experience compassion. So, with that lens being how we look at the world, we actually cannot imagine or see what's really horizontal. It's hard to get a handle on. So, in horizontal, we would have high expectations with consent and with boundaries. That's not disengagement. That's not non demandingness. However, it is completely different to demandingness, control, and strictness. They're not at all the same thing. High expectations, consent, and boundaries are thoroughly horizontal, whereas demandingness, control, and strictness are thoroughly vertical. Now we're starting to see why there's an issue with that little matrix, right? So if we're putting these here and these here, so the demandingness, control, and strictness belongs with the vertical view, and the high expectations, consent, and boundaries belongs with the horizontal view. Now we're going to add in responsiveness and warmth. So if we do that with horizontal, we end up with partnership, right? We're respectful of each other and we are responsive to each other. We are true partners, and this is beautiful, right? It's lovely watching sometimes marriages and other relationships, parenting relationships shift from the misery over there on the vertical into the beautiful options that come through when we manage to make the shift to horizontal. What happens when we add responsiveness and warmth over here on vertical? Because you can be very responsive and warm while being strict and controlling, right? And you end up with the benevolent dictator, okay? Or the idea of the good king. The kingdom got lucky and they got a good and wise ruler who could have chopped off their heads if he had wanted to, but he didn't, right? But he could have. He was still in vertical. And that's where authoritative parenting lives. But the problem is that a benevolent dictator is a very different thing to a partner. They are not at all the same. So if we're looking at demandingness, control, and strictness plus responsiveness and warmth equals this authoritative parenting style of the benevolent dictator, and then that maps beautifully over here. But then what do we do with this one? Because where does it go, given that the benevolent dictator is not a partner? Well, a lot of people have been still putting it here, and that's where we've been seeing the problem. We've been going, hang on a second, there's more than one thing going on in this quadrant, and they don't belong together, right? So what happens when people try to map this, which I'm now pointing out, is the invisible parenting style, because it doesn't fit on the map. Okay. When people try to make it fit on the map, some of them will still put it over there into authoritative, but others who are trying to make sense of it, if they're looking through a vertical lens, they won't put it there. They will put it here. They will say, oh, this is just permissiveness under a nicer name, or they might even say this is neglectful, to use the old term. And this articulates a problem that we see again and again and again in the self-directed education community, where one parent who has learned authoritative parenting and they know that it's good practice and they are right, will look at the other parent who's now moving to horizontal and they'll go, oh, no, that's going backwards. That's going into suboptimal parenting. And this problem is even bigger because we have teachers and we have psychologists and we have family doctors and we have all kinds of helping professionals saying to parents who are busy moving to horizontal, oh, that's backwards. It's away from authoritative. You're heading into permissive or into neglectful, simply because this parenting style is invisible and it doesn't actually fit on this map. So where does it fit and what's the explanation? So, whenever you've got this nice two-dimensional graph, the matrix and the slider, it's like, oh, high and low control and high and low warmth. We forget that our models are not reality. Okay? They're not reality. They're a way of thinking, and they can also constrain our thinking. So we've got these two matrices, but now we actually have another one that's three-dimensional. Now, this gets hard for us to imagine or model. But if we've got these two, we've also got this additional one, which is about equality. And this is the aha that comes when we put this together with the horizontal communication framework, because that is the difference between vertical and horizontal. In vertical, people are not equal, low equality. It's like it is hierarchical. The person at the top has more status, has more power. And on the horizontal side, that isn't the case. It's a flat hierarchy, which is kind of an oxymoron. But, we are all equal. We are different, but equal. Nobody has higher status, which is also where we get confusion around words like respect, because on the left, respect means deference. It means I give way to somebody with more status and power, even if I despise them. Whereas on the horizontal side, respect means I acknowledge your dignity and your human rights, no matter what, no matter who you are. And respect can also then start meaning, I value your experience. I see you as a mentor. Many of these things can start unfolding, but respect is not deference. So when we look at putting this slider onto that other model, we get something quite interesting happening, because on this side, low equality translates into hierarchy and privilege and imposition. You can impose on people if you're at the top, no problem. Whereas if we're looking at higher levels of equality, we start getting into things like dignity and human rights instead of privilege, and issues of consent rather than imposition. We now have to find out if it's okay to ask you for something instead of just expecting obedience and imposing upon you. So now what we get when we look at this, when we bring in this dimension of power relationships, it can be pretty obvious that on this end, we're dealing with obedience. And on that end, we are dealing with cooperation, which again might look very similar when we're looking through a vertical lens. Hard to see the difference. Whereas once we're looking through a horizontal lens, they have all the difference in the world, because obedience comes from a place of fear, even if it's quite low grade fear, right? Even if it's just habit, I must obey. Why must you obey? Because otherwise there'll be consequences if you don't obey. Whereas cooperation is a voluntary thing. I want to cooperate with you because we care for each other and I trust you. And I know that you value my needs as you value your own, and we need to work together for a win-win rather than going for this win-lose thing where everybody's always jockeying for position. So now if we start mapping things onto here, and we're looking at there's hierarchy and privilege and imposition over here with the obedience, and there's equality, human rights, and dignity over here with the cooperation, then we come to something that, for want of a better word right now, I'll call partnership parenting. I think a number of different people have tried to name this a number of different ways, but let's just go with this idea of partnership parenting as a sort of a catch-all for now, because there's actually a few variations in style up here as well. But I don't want to get too complex with this multidimensional matrix. So let's just cluster them together and say partnership parenting, which is about cooperation. Now let's notice all of the others are about obedience. Whether we want to use that word, which is a little strong and old-fashioned, it's still what it is. This is all of these. Authoritarian and authoritative and permissive and uninvolved, they all involve issues of obedience, whether it's obedience or disobedience. Everything clusters over low equality over here. So a little bit of some people going, no, but hang on a second. Permissive is definitely equal. No, come to that in a minute. But let's just reiterate obedience this end and cooperation that end. Now we can see, yeah, that's not quite fair. Let's just take this back a second. It's not quite fair, right? Because that makes it look like all of these are, the dregs. It's like, oh, you're so terrible. You're right on the low end of equality. How bad you are. And we start getting into this game of who's better than. No, not really. Because if we look at this, we really look at this equality slider. At the worst end of equality, you actually get chattel status. Chattel means a human being is owned by another human being. They are no longer a person, they are property. So over here, when we've really got seriously low equality, we've got things like slavery. And we've got that old parenting approach where a child can be killed by a parent without any consequences to the parent because the child is the parent's property. That's what's really on the low end of this slider. And on this end, as we start centering human rights and dignity, that can already to some extent happen in the middle. But when we really start looking at consent, then we're really treating people as equals. And that's where we get this partnership parenting as a kind of an extreme up this end of equality, right? And down this end, it's actually abusive parenting that we're going to find. Because if you look at the literature around the parenting styles, the emphasis is that these are normal. All of them are normal. All of them are okay, right? Yes, this happened to you and you turned out fine. There is a level on which that is true. While, yes, it is also true that the kids raised with authoritative parenting are going to have better long-term outcomes than those raised with authoritarian or permissive or uninvolved. All of them are still going to be kind of functional. You're going to grow up kind of functional, which becomes a very different picture when you get to truly abusive parenting. In the middle here, yeah, therapy is going to help you make your life better. Whereas down here in abusive parenting, therapy is going to make your life possible. Yeah. Whereas partnership parenting is kind of something that's emerging now. And this is also where people aren't used to seeing this yet and don't know what they're looking at. Because it's only really since we started articulating things like human rights and in universal human dignity and discovering concepts like consent and being able to put words on them, that we were able to start thinking of young people as young humans instead of putting them in the separate category of children who aren't really actually fully human yet and are sort of our property. So we still come to the fact that even when we reframe obedience as behavioral control, it is still about behavioral control. And that is a term that is used now to describe authoritative parenting, that it has quite a high level of behavioral control by the adult of the young person. Whereas once we come to partnership type parenting styles, we see that it's not about behavioral control anymore. Self-regulation and cooperative behavior is a side effect that emerges from us caring about and meeting each other's needs. It isn't about controlling the behavior. So that is going to tell us exactly why authoritative parenting does not work with PDA. And this has again been a source of conflict in many, many households where one parent is determined to use authoritative parenting because it's the best. And the other parent is realizing that only partnership parenting is going to actually work, because partnership parenting works great for both PDA and for self-directed education, also called natural learning, also called unschooling. So you can have two parents or in-laws or social workers on a very different page when this parenting style is invisible, because they don't understand that we're actually moving to something that is better for the child's well-being than authoritative parenting. And when PDA is in the mix, we're moving to maybe the only thing that's going to really support that child to thrive. So if we have to fit it together so that it's not invisible and we don't have to talk about different sliders and we don't have to put things in a way that looks better than, if we want to try and just pop it into here in a way that's a bit more acceptable for everybody, we can put it in between here and here quite easily, because this is obviously parent directed. By definition, the parent is meant to remain an authority. Whereas here, you even see in Baumrein's, excuse me, I think I'm allergic to both of these parenting styles. They've given me so much trouble over the years. Baumrein's original taxonomy, she actually, called it, she put it there, this is child directed, which is problematic. And she's right, it is problematic, because this is not child directed, actually. This is actually collaboratively directed. Horizontal approaches treat everyone as valid, everyone as equal, and we work things out together in a win-win way to meet all needs. It's not about swapping parent power for child power, which is a common mistake that many people make when they first come to horizontal communication or unschooling or any of these things. And that's a very natural thing. It's not surprising, because imagination is not perception. When we first find out about these alternatives, we imagine what they are like. And then some people run away screaming and go, that will never work. But they haven't actually seen the evidence, they haven't actually experienced it. Whereas others go, oh, yes, that will work. And I get it. I understand it. I know exactly what it'll do. But they also haven't lived it yet. So they don't realize that they're projecting their kind of wishful thinking onto it. Because the problem is, again, we all grew up with vertical culture. That's what we see. That's how we see. That's normal. We actually have to go through a shift in perception, a paradigm shift, which is a process, right? Before we can actually see horizontally. So, where, for example, Baumrind originally called it demandingness, control, and obedience terms were all kind of coming in like that. And then later we have this softening into terms like behavioral control, which are more neutral and less kind of morally charged. In the same way as, that's happening, when people look with vertical eyes at horizontal, they often think that horizontal means be vertical in a nice, kind, friendly, warm, and polite way. Okay? But vertical is not horizontal, no matter how sweet you are about it, which is the one end of misunderstanding that happens when people first come to this work. And then, of course, you get that flip side, which is where you get the permissive parenting, in that when we think vertically and we try and become horizontal, we often make the mistake of, I'm going to give up my power position and I'm going to give that power position to somebody else and I'm going to go under. So whether that's with a partner or a child or whoever it might be, there's this misunderstanding that becoming a doormat or a martyr and giving someone else the top position is horizontal, when in fact it's still vertical. It is not horizontal. Horizontal is something different. And when you see it, when you have the shift, when you have the aha, then you know it. That will become perception, but that is a process to get there. So I've used this analogy here. It's like, this is a lovely picture of roses, and we all know roses mean love. So now we know, we look at this picture and we see love. That's cool, lovely. Okay, great. We can all agree. We know what we see now. Okay. Can you see the heart? Because this is actually a picture of a heart, and it's not hard to find. It's a great big fat heart, pretty much the same sort of shape as these two green hearts and slightly bigger than they are. So can you see it in this picture? So let's zoom in, shall we? And I stole this from the Magic Eye site, and it was hard to figure out their permissions. So I am just taking the license and I'm promoting them. as a way to ask forgiveness instead of permission. So here's their address, www.magiceye.com, and they've got loads of really, really fun stuff. Go there. It's incredible. And it's also useful to share that site with other people so they can have this aha and get this analogy and realize that there are more ways to see things in the world. So can you see the heart now that it's nice and big and staring you in the face? Hmm? You want to take a moment to try? You can even pause the video and have a look. So people who've done this before know what to do, and they'll see the heart, some of us quite quickly if we've had a lot of practice. Can do it in a few seconds. Those who don't know what to do and haven't done this before could stare at this for days on end. And they might start drawing lines and going, yeah, I see the heart. It must be over there. Kind of, yeah, I kind of see how it's sort of. Whereas when you focus your eyes beyond your screen and you look through your screen, you will suddenly see very clearly this beautiful third dimensional 3D heart popping out at you. And if you've gone to watch a 3D movie, you'll know the feeling. You'll know when to recognize what you're seeing because it's absolutely unmistakable. But that won't happen until you shift the way you are looking. So that is what happens when we grow up with vertical culture and it seems normal to us, even when we decide to change because our gut is telling us we want horizontal, the planet needs horizontal, we all need horizontal. We still struggle to see clearly what is what. And even when we see, we still lack the skills because we didn't get them growing up. So, how are we supposed to master this partnership, both for parenting and for education facilitation, which is going to be the subject of my next video? How are we supposed to master this? Firstly, when we come in, we can't even see. And once we see, we still don't know what to do. And that is why I run courses. And yeah, it takes time. It's a process. It's not something you learn about with your head. It's something you actually need to chew on and embody and play with. So it takes time. It takes a much wider range of ahas. I've got a whole bouquet of ahas to share with you if and when you want to. And it takes practice. One of my big mistakes when I was first learning about different kinds of communication is I read all the books and I grasped all the concepts and I was still absolute rubbish at it. I couldn't do it to save my life until I started practicing and making mistakes and reverse engineering. And then, yeah, it started to come. And it helps enormously to have community because this is a kind of culture. And the more that the people around you are still very much in vertical, it's going to be hard to shift. And the more the people around you are more in horizontal, the easier it becomes with that lived experience. So that is why I run courses and support groups. And this year, in 2026, we're going to do this together for 9 whole months. I can't wait. We're going to start in a couple of weeks. And we're going to be doing it also in 3 languages this year, which I'm hugely excited about because I've got these 2 beautiful people who've been working with me for ages and also helping with the translations of my books, Max and Sylvie. So you are also invited to come along. And you can find more details on my website, which is very simple. It's justmyname.com. Try to keep it simple. And if you're unsure whether this course is possible for you when you've viewed those details, like you don't have the time or money's an issue and all of this, just contact me and let's see what we can figure out because, you know, it's like what really matters is the shifting and what it does for the young people in our lives. So you can also contact Sylvie for French and Max for German. And that brings us to the end for today. I hope to see you there. And yeah, many thanks to my wonderful patrons. And see you next time.